joining me now is Tony Herbert, a community advocate who has been a candidate for office before and is now running again in the special election for public advocate. And he'll be on the ballot February 26th on the Residents First party line.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. Yes, absolutely. So for voters who may be unfamiliar with you, say a little bit about who you are, your resume, what does it mean to be a community advocate? How does that work?
Well, first and foremost, a lot of folks in New York do know who I am. I've actually infiltrated some of their bedrooms and their living rooms through the work that I've done utilizing the media for the purposes of holding press conferences to make people aware of some of the issues that's going on in our community. Challenging the issues of gun and gang violence, having to been out at the forefront, pushing the mayor's hand and making sure that he creates better synergistic relationships between community and the African American community in particular. Culminate that with the thought process. I also helped to bring in a lot of money because of that. Now there's monies going into these programs called Cure Violence, which is mirrored to the campaign that came out of Chicago for ceasefire. So, I've been doing a lot of work in that I've utilized media, for the most part. I've had the confidence of a lot of media outlets who find that my information is credible, so they would cover my stories of me advocating for people in our community, i.e. that of NYCHA as well, for the most part. But utilizing all of my experiences, having worked for congressmen in towns, working in the city council, also working in the state senate, working on Wall Street and working on Madison Avenue. Culminate all those experiences, I brought it to bear that I just needed to do something to change the dynamics of community, and not without coming from some type of a background of adversity. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, with a single mom who raised 4 boys by herself on a salary of next to nothing. We were forced because of gentrification to move into an abandoned building as squatters for about 8.5 months. And that's when I saw my life focused in a direction where I needed to go out there and make changes, because we were able to get out of that circumstance through our own due diligence, but at the same time had no support of elected officials. And that made me realize something had to be done. And that's how I jumped into the life of community advocacy and government.
So you want to be public advocate.
Yes.
How do you explain to people, again, some people watching know you, don't know you. Some people know what a public advocate is, some people don't know. So how do you explain to voters who say, you're running for public advocate, what's that exactly?
Well, public advocate, quite frankly, is the watchdog of city agencies and this mayor. And honestly, of all that's not right here in our city, to ensure that we as residents have access to the resources our taxes pay for, and that which is allocated for us to become responsible and productive citizens. Culminate that with the thought process. I've been the public advocate, quite frankly, in doing the work that I've been doing in the community and outreaching. I mean, I've probably processed maybe about 1,500 to 2,000 cases personally myself around a myriad of issues: housing, issues with regards to affordable housing, affordable for whom will be the question later on. Culminate that with also that I've also been able to help with issues with veterans, disabled. I've worked in a homeless shelter for mentally ill women. So I've got a lot of different experiences that I brought to bear through my experience of working through government that actually has me doing the job of the public advocate without the resources and without the financing.
When you say you've worked with people to help on housing, affordable housing, or veterans issues, you mean as an aid in government, you've helped people find the resources that they could utilize, and you've been able to connect them, or something different than that?
I started out in government utilizing the office to do just that. However, as private John Q. Public, I've also utilized the relationships I've established working in government when I left that employment. So I continued that which I already had been doing and shared that information and that knowledge to be helpful. So yeah, plugging people into where they need to go so that they can get access to the resources that will help them out with their cases.
So if you do become officially the public advocate, you win the special election, you get an office with a budget of roughly $3 million. People call it small, which relative to some of the rest of city government may be, but it's $3 million is nothing to sniff at. And you get to hire maybe, let's say, a couple dozen people. It depends how much you pay them and what you want you want that to look like. So tell us what that would look like. How would you use those resources? How would you run the office?
Well, the office, first and foremost, definitely should be in a position to be able to bring about litigation as established by the former public advocate. However, from a different angle, I would approach that, but not to put it out yet until the campaign is over, because I don't want my opponents using that thought process. But I would also expand on the number of outreach coordinators that I have in the city. I think what people need to identify with when I worked in a public office as a community liaison and an ombudsman, oftentimes people didn't have that connection. So the staffing in the office wasn't abreast of what they should be doing to assist those individuals with these social issues. So I would expand on putting more deputy public advocates in the boroughs, opening up offices so that folks would have access, so that if in fact that they're having a problem in one place, they know that this is the place they can come that will focus them and put them in the right direction and make the connections to help them with their casing. Now, also, there are a lot of young people who are going to college for political, science and things of that nature. I would employ those individuals on a part-time basis. So now you're stretching your budget, but getting more people engaged. And now I have more ombudsmen who are now out there with their ear to the ground that can bring back the information so that we can be ahead of the curve and not trying to go along with because we're not connecting with the people.
New York City right now is in a very interesting place. Crime is fairly low compared to where we've been, of course. I mean, it's all relative. But compared to where we've been, crime is relatively low. Employment's relatively high. But there's some real crises, whether it's NYCHA or how the subways are running. So how do you capture, how do you assess where the city is right now? What do you identify as sort of things that are going fairly well and things that really need attention?
I think that there's still a serious disconnect with regards to government and community. One place that I would definitely focus a lot of energy on is actually allowing for and making provisions for residents in our community who are proactive and getting them to the table so that they're a part of the process. Oftentimes decisions are being made without the community being involved. And hence that, the idea, go to your community board meeting if you want to know what's going on. However, if 90,000 people jumped up and said they wanted to go to the community board meeting that day, where will you accommodate them at if you only have a place that holds 100? So one of the things that I would push for is some legislation that mandates community boards immediately post their minutes of their meetings monthly on a site and or mail to every registered voter in the city so that everybody would have access to the information. That's one place to start so that we're all getting the same information at the same time. So when you look at the city as a whole, is crime low? Crime where? Depending upon what you're talking about. I still think there's a lot of work to be done, but that also means that we need to include more people to help that resolve.
Any issues that you would say, these are my top 3 issues coming in? Are there issues you would say as public advocate, I already know that we need to take a closer look at X, Y, and Z?
The 3 issues I most importantly would look at, quite frankly, is affordable housing. Again, asking the question, affordable to whom? As you look at the AMI for a lot of different communities, the
area median income.
If you look at that, sometimes that varies. I mean, I can't prioritize it, but there are so many different things that needs to be attacked at one time. And fortunately, I will staff the office accordingly because of the experiences and be able to go after everything in one flush. However, if you look at affordable housing, particularly the issues in NYCHA, I've been a staunch advocate for NYCHA for the last 10 years before everybody now just realized NYCHA exists.
And people often, you didn't do this, but people often separate affordable housing and NYCHA when it really should be part of the same conversation.
I want to say, because you have a lot of apartments that are not back on the rent rolls. And as long as they keep them off the rent rolls, we can't get the homeless population off our streets and or out of the shelters. 60,000 people are homeless. That's high. 23,000 to 24,000 of which are children. So we have to identify that issue and make sure that we talk about what's really affordable when we have a mayor that's selling off our properties and saying this is the best thing for you, when actuality it isn't, if in fact that those monies that's coming from supposedly these rentals is not going back in to fix the problem that we're discussing today.
When you say the mayor's selling off the properties, are you talking about the NYCHA infill property, development on NYCHA land, or are you talking about private land with the upzoning?
We're speaking directly to the NYCHA properties where the basketball courts, the parking lots, and things of that like are being taken away under the premise that we're going to let developers come in, let them develop, and we're going to take the tax base from that, and that's going to fix NYCHA. So actually, if that's the case, then as public advocate, I would be the watchdog to make sure that that's what's happening.
And so this is a very important, I think, issue that's coming up because the mayor outlined in December a more aggressive infill plan that public advocate candidates should have a position on. And yours sounds like, yes, that seems like a way to bring in revenue to NYCHA, but we need to watch it very carefully.
We need to watch it to make sure that's happening. Well, in actuality, I just filed a lawsuit, or I'm calling for charges. Let me correct that. I'm calling for charges through, courtesy of the Attorney General. I'm saying to her clearly, Tish, we need to go after this deal that was just cut by NYCHA and HUD. This seems to be another land grab on behalf of the developers. Remember, Donald Trump is a developer. So anything that he co-signs on, you have to be concerned about. And to have to say that we're going to cut this deal, that NYCHA and the HUD is going to work together under this administration, some serious concerns, and we have to watch that. But again, there's a serious level of neglect that has taken place, and it has to be addressed, and somebody has to be held accountable.
Let's go affordable housing outside of NYCHA. Connected, but somewhat separate policy issues. The mayor's plan has been rezonings in a variety of neighborhoods, allow for more density, some of it's affordable, some of it's market rate. It comes with tens or hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes in community investment, some parkland, some new school seats, but some people say the balance is off.
You know, all that glitter isn't gold, and I'll tell you why. We have an issue right now with regards to a rezoning that was done by one of my opponents, Raphael Espinal, along with the mayor in East New York. East New York and Bushwick. Rezoned, now 50,000 people are probably going to be gentrified out of their community. That has to be monitored and watched at the end of the day, because if you're talking about this is to the betterment of the community, I'd like to see where that is, and they still haven't laid that out.
And are you someone of the mind of, we do need more housing in the city, we do need to build more, okay, but you want to see more of it for lower income folks? There's an argument that says the mayor has a 300,000 unit affordable housing plan. Maybe the number should be lower because then we can concentrate the subsidies for the people in the lowest incomes, the people coming out of homelessness. Do you have a sense of where you fall in that argument?
You know, I was sitting down with some folks that's consulting me on housing issues in our city. There's still a lot of properties in New York that has not been touched. And in given that, what we're looking at is a concern that this mayor is selling that off for $1. But the question is, who are you selling it to? And it's going to the developers. As a watchdog, there would have to be a moratorium with regards to the abilities that this mayor has to offer that up. I would push the city council to put a block on some of that.
And you want to see that go to the affordable housing developers and not
but to folks that
for-profit.
are really in need of affordable housing. Affordable for whom is the question.
And we had a little bit of an exchange about where crime is in the city. You said you've been involved in issues related to cure violence and getting funding for community groups. What's your assessment of how policing is being done in the city? Have you seen reforms? Do you think there's still an over-policing of communities of color? Has that ever been an issue to you? You know, where do you sort of fall in that discussion?
About 2 years ago, I actually went, and I think it was about 2 years ago, I took coffins to City Hall to put a mandate to this mayor that he needs to pay attention about synergistic relationships, because people are dying in our community. Young black men are being shot and killed and what have you. And oftentimes, everybody's participatory in what have you. I'm not saying that police were doing it intentionally, it's just happening. And one of the concerns was that police were involved in that activity. So with that being said, I had always been the bridge developer with regards to those relationships and building the bridges for us to have those interactions. So yes, I think that the police department is doing a fantastic job in their outreach. Do I think there's a little bit too much overreach, because now we're pushing a lot of our cops into being social workers and not really being able to do the law enforcement? Because irrespective of what they say, crime may be down, and if you look at their statistics, it's down by 30%. That 30% could just be 2 crimes or 2 things that have been committed that lowered the number, or not committed. So what we're saying is there is crime is taking place. Just today, I'm dealing with an issue in Red Hook houses that I'm going to right after I leave here. And basically, we have elderly people being assaulted inside housing developments and being robbed for their paychecks or their Social Security checks or whatever it is that they get, for subsidy. They're now being robbed inside the buildings, and people are stalking. So crime to me is not down. Crime has just shifted a little bit because now folks know what they need to do in order not to get arrested.
Well, they're certainly right, and I think even the NYPD commissioner has said, there's 6 to 12 precincts where we really need to still pay a lot of attention. So it's always a nuanced picture in New York City. It's never monolithic. In our last couple of minutes, transit is obviously an issue that's been on the mind of a lot of people. The MTA, it's not controlled by the public advocate or the mayor or the city council, but the mayor appoints 4 board members to the MTA board, has a lot of say in the capital budget. Are there things as public advocate you would push on related to transit? Are there things you think need to be addressed?
Well, one, most importantly, I would push to see that we can get a seat, the public advocate can have a seat on that board, so that we can actually give the input of the people. Because it seems as though a lot of the fat cats that's on that board, primarily, they don't even ride the train. They may have a Metro card, but they don't ride the train. And when it's all said and done, someone needs to be there to advocate to make sure that the people's voices are being heard about the issues that's happening in subway in transit, I should say.
And the other piece of that puzzle is the buses, and that's where the mayor does have more control, being the city streets and routes and things. Is that something you hear out on the campaign trail, concerns about the buses because they seem to be crawling around the city?
I actually work with a group of MTA workers called Progressive Action, and am a participatory member in some of the issues and the rallies that they hold. There's a lot of issues with the buses, particularly with older buses being put on routes in communities of color, where they say that, oh, they put them there because there's not a lot of money coming in because people are just jumping on the bus and not paying. So when you say these kind of things, it has to be looked at, with a really strict eye to say, hey, look, no one should be getting any subpoor, type of conditions with regards to whatever transportation is provided for them. So we have to monitor. So yeah, there's some issues with buses. Timing is an issue, but also you got to contribute that to the traffic patterns that they've created that's causing a lot of the issues.
All right, we've touched on a lot of things. We're going to have to leave it there. Tony Herbert, candidate for public advocate, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.